The storm clouds over New Jersey hung like a leaden shield, pressing down on the roofs of the suburban houses. David Miller picked up his pace, feeling the damp wind crawl under the collar of his leather jacket. The streets of Fairfield were dead. Only rare flashes of lightning momentarily flooded the asphalt with a deathly white light. In one of those flashes, David saw him. On the opposite side of the road, directly under a broken streetlight, stood a figure. He stood out against the gray haze in a stark white hoodie that seemed far too clean for such a grimy night. The hood was pulled over his head, concealing his face, but David could feel a steady, unblinking gaze fixed right on him. Miller wasn't a coward, but something about the stranger's posture made his heart skip a beat. He ducked into a narrow trail leading through the old park, hoping it was just a random passerby. However, the sound of footsteps behind him emerged almost instantly. It was a strange rhythm, soft, springy, and terrifyingly fast. David looked over his shoulder and froze. The white figure had already crossed the road and was closing the distance with every breath he took. Lightning split the sky again. In that brief electric discharge, David caught a glimpse of his pursuer's face. Pale, corpse-like skin and a fixed, manic grin. In the stranger's lowered hand, a knife blade glinted, long, sharp, and looking like a natural extension of his own arm. David broke into a sprint. He leaped over fallen branches, his sneakers skidding on the wet grass. The woods around him whispered and snapped, as if mocking his attempt to escape. He burst into an open clearing where an old, abandoned barn stood. Bolting inside, he slammed the heavy oak door shut and shoved the rusted bolt into place. The interior smelled of hay and old iron. David pressed his back against the door, trying to steady his shaking knees. Silence. A minute passed, then two. He began to hope the pursuer had passed by, when suddenly a knife blade punched through the thick wood of the door just inches from his head. The steel grated against the timber, moving slowly downward as if someone were leisurely opening a tin can. The door shuddered under a massive blow. The bolt held, but the wood began to splinter. David looked around frantically and scrambled up an old ladder to the hayloft. Hiding among the dusty bales of hay, he watched through the cracks in the floor as the white figure stepped over the threshold. The intruder moved soundlessly, his knife tracing lazy arcs in the air. Miller's hand found a pair of heavy blacksmith tongs forgotten on a beam. As the pale face of the pursuer appeared in the ladder opening, David knew there was nowhere left to run. He lunged forward, his weight slamming into the intruder, and the knife blade instantly ripped through his jacket sleeve. A violent, chaotic struggle broke out in the cramped space. Miller swung the heavy tongs with desperate force, but the attacker was incredibly agile. Another thrust of the knife caught in a wooden beam, the blade sinking deep. Seizing the second, David kicked the attacker squarely in the chest. The figure flew backward, crashing through the flimsy railing and falling to the ground floor into a pile of old farm equipment with a dull thud. Miller scrambled down the ladder. In the light of another lightning flash, he saw the motionless body in the white hoodie sprawled among broken crates. Without waiting a second longer, he burst out into the freezing rain and ran toward the distant lights of the highway. Later, sitting in a patrol car, David watched the police cordoning off the Officers with flashlights searched the building, but when one returned, his face was pale. The barn was empty. Where the intruder had fallen, there were only drops of a dark liquid and a deep groove in the dusty floor, leading out into the darkness of the back.